Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with your Alaska weather. As always, please visit our website at arh.noaa.gov. You can get any updates to our forecast or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391. Get the same information through that means as well. And we have Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube accounts that you can follow us on. Speaking of Facebook, we put out a post this afternoon that talks about snow for the Cook Inlet area. So there's a little bit of variation in what we're seeing here, and as we look out, the main deformation zone looks right now to set up out over the western part of Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, stretching out towards the Kenai and Soldotna area. So as we go into the nighttime hours, we are looking at those locations seeing the best chance for some snow overnight. Further to the east, chances are a little bit less. Primarily just going to see some lighter rain and snow showers over the Anchorage and Wasilla areas. Shouldn't see a whole lot of accumulations unless you're at some of the higher elevations, maybe on hillside. But right now, the best guidance that we have is saying that best chances for snow are going to be out a little bit further to the west over the Kenai and Soldotna areas. If you look out over on the right of this map, you can see quite a few different temperatures here. I'll explain it a little bit. Kenai is on the top, Soldotna is on the bottom, and it goes tonight in the left column, Friday in the middle column, and then Saturday on that far right column with the highs up top and the lows down on bottom there. And you can see as we move out into the weekend here, we have lows getting down into the 20s for both Kenai and Soldotna, with the lowest there Saturday night getting down to 24 and 26 degrees. And we are expecting those colder temps to start to back off as we move into Sunday and into the week. So our coldest period will be this Friday night, Saturday night time frame, and then some of our temperatures are going to become a little bit more mild moving into the beginning of next week. Now for our satellite imagery, starting off, we'll take a look at the low coming up towards the Gulf from the south, bringing in a lot of moisture with this towards the southeast part of the state, bringing in some rain there and the potential for some isolated thunderstorms out over the water right along that Gulf coastline on the Panhandle area. As we watch this loop again, you can see another low. It's kind of hard to make out on this satellite imagery, but it's bringing in some showers here in the North Gulf. To the North Gulf coast, we're going to see some isolated rain showers, and some of those bleeding into the Cook Inlet area, seeing some isolated showers out there as well. One more time, we'll take a look, and we're going to focus on the northerly flow coming in, pushing in some of those colder temperatures down, which is what's going to start to bring in the possibility for some snow overnight. But right now, a lot of that cloud cover is getting held up along the Alaska Range, and that's true of those temperatures as well. A lot of that colder air getting hung up there, so we're going to see how much of that can bleed through to give us some snow in the south central area for tonight. As we watch one more time way out to the west, you can see a lot of the darker cloud cover here. That just means that it's a lot of lower clouds there, so a lot of stratus out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands with some higher clouds coming in towards the western Aleutian Islands there at the end of the loop. Looking at our weather for the remainder of today, we do have some high pressure building in out over the Bering Sea, pushing in more and more to the east as we track through time, with some isolated rain showers out over the central Bering, pushing down into the central Aleutian Islands as well. As we move out a little bit further to the east, you can see where we have that cold front drawn with that colder air coming in from the north, meeting up with this low and getting pulled down through those gaps in the Alaska Range, and it's starting to bring some stronger winds in with some of those areas down there to the south as well. But for precipitation, we have rain all the way along the Alaska Peninsula there, and it's starting to get colder behind that with that colder flow. So we are seeing snow showers extend down from the Point Hope area all the way down the far west coast into the YK Delta area. A little bit further inland, not seeing a whole lot, but as we get along the Alaska Range, we're going to see those showers start to transition over from the rain showers up to the snow showers as we get east of McGrath. For the remainder of the interior locations, we do have some snow and fog in the central and eastern interior, stretching up through the Brooks Range and all the way along the Arctic coastline. For the south central now, some lingering rain showers, not seeing the colder air in there yet, and along the North Gulf Coast as well. Strongest rain, however, is down in the Panhandle area, seeing some of that southerly flow, bringing up a lot of moisture and a lot of rain to those areas. And there is the potential in the afternoon and evening hours today to see some isolated thunderstorms along that Gulf coastline there in the Panhandle, but the rain is going to linger all night, even though those showers should diminish in the evening hours. Along the North Gulf Coast, we are going to see that rain continuing to the Prince William Sound area, but starting to get cold enough overnight to see a mix of rain and snow for most locations in the South Central, with areas in the Copper River Basin seeing snow. Then all the way along the Alaska Range, going to see snow with those colder temperatures. Moving up into the interior, starting to see some of that mix with fog as we get out towards the eastern parts of the interior, up into the upper Yukon Valley, but the remainder of the central interior seeing a lot of snow, and that's going to expand a little bit to the west, starting to make it towards the Galena area overnight. Through the Brooks Range and along the Arctic coastline, going to see some snow and fog up there. And then along the west coast, going to see this similar pattern where we have snow extending down from the Point Hope area through Tin City, St. Lawrence Island, down to the YK Delta. But those eastern portions of Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound not expected to see a lot of snow overnight. Then in the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, going to see a lot of rain showers out there, especially under that northerly flow and along the Alaska Peninsula. And then way out west, going to start to see some of that mix in with the fog due to that high pressure that is pushing in from the west there. And now we did have rain showers during the day today around Bristol Bay, but that's going to transition over to snow as it gets colder there tonight. Then on Friday, high pressure slowly moving to the east, but continuing to see rain showers underneath that with fog out there in the way western parts. A little bit colder now for the Pribilof, seeing a mixture of rain and snow. And as we look at Bristol Bay, going to continue to see snow showers primarily against the Aleutian Range extending down into the Alaska Peninsula. And our similar feature along the west coast of the state, seeing those light snow showers extending down from Point Hope area through the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, down into the YK Delta. But continuing as we move off to the eastern portions of the Seward Peninsula, not going to see a lot of precipitation on Friday. Along the Arctic coastline east of Barrow, we are going to see some snow out there, and that snow going to continue for much of the central and eastern interior, but no longer out by the Galena area. Should be drier out there on Friday. Down into the Alaska Range, seeing a lot of snow, and then a rain and snow mix through much of the south central, becoming more rain in the Prince William Sound area, and then seeing a lot of rain continuing in the southeast part of the state, with the potential in the afternoon to see some isolated thunderstorms along the coastline of the Gulf. Then on Saturday, starting to diminish, but still going to see some light showers out there for the Panhandle area, and then becoming just some isolated mix of rain and snow showers near the eastern parts of the Prince William Sound by Cordova. Some lighter snow moving in underneath the effects of this high pressure. The high is going to diminish a lot of the snow, but some of the stratus that's stuck underneath that's still going to give some really light flurries out there for parts of the interior, up to the eastern parts of the interior into the upper Yukon Valley. And along the Arctic coastline, going to see some snow up there. And finally on Saturday, flow is going to switch, become more southwesterly, bringing in some more precipitation to all the parts around the Norton Sound and Kotzebue Sound areas, bringing in snow to those locations. Warmer out west, starting to see rain and snow out there, extending down into the YK Delta. And then some lighter showers along the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian Islands, with some heavier rain coming in with a new system that we have coming in from the west. Taking a look now at our temperatures, we'll start off in the southeast part of the state. As of 2 p.m. this afternoon in the Panhandle, temperatures in the mid to upper 40s, 48 down there at Ketchikan-Sitka at 49 degrees and 46 for Yakutat. So moving to the south central, mid 40s for most locations. Colder as we get further to the north. Talkeetna 39 degrees this afternoon, Glen Allen 34. Warmer there at Kodiak, up to 50 degrees this afternoon at 2 p.m. Into the interior, southern portions of the interior in the 20s, getting colder as we get further to the north. Bettles there around 15 degrees, and then 7 degrees through the pass, pretty cold as we get up along the Arctic coastline. Most places in the teens, but in the single digits near Barrow. So we move along the western part of the state. Teens continuing through Kotzebue area, but as we get to the Seward Peninsula, in the mid to upper 20s there. And then taking us down into the southwest part of the state, just above freezing along the coastline, but as we get closer towards Bethel and Antioch, 28 degrees there this afternoon. Mid to upper 30s for locations throughout the Bristol Bay area towards the Aleutian Range and Iliamna, and then down in the Alaska Peninsula in the 40s there. Warmest on the Pacific side, 48 for Sandpoint. So we move out towards the eastern Aleutian Islands, 43 degrees for Unalaska. And then staying in the mid-40s, dropping down to the lower 40s as we get further off towards the west. Shimei there at 42 degrees. and the upper 30s for the Pribilofs with 38 for St. Paul, 39 for St. George. Taking a look at our lows for tonight, staying around 40 degrees throughout the Aleutian Islands. Into the Pribilofs, dropping down to the mid-30s there, not much change, and then dropping down into the mid-20s for the Bristol Bay area, and that's going to be true of the YK Delta as well. AKwx staying a little bit warmer there, 36 for a low tonight. Dropping down into the 20s along the western coast of the Seward Peninsula, but going down into the single digits as we get further off to the east. Pretty cold along the Arctic coastline, dropping down to around 10 degrees there, which is actually a little bit warmer for the Barrow area. They're actually going to warm up a little bit overnight tonight. As we look down into the interior, in the teens for most locations, getting into the 20s as we get closer towards the Alaska Range with Fairbanks at 21 degrees. Eagle and Northway both at 20, and then into the 30s, staying above freezing for the most part in the south central, even though we are going to see some snow there, not expecting a lot to stick around, some slushy snow maybe for that Kenai Soldotna area, and then only dropping to around 40 degrees as we get along the North Gulf Coast, with Seward dropping down to 40 degrees. Down in the peninsula, we are going to see temperatures in the lower to mid 40s with the warmest temperatures in the south. Highs for tomorrow, getting up to around 50 degrees in the south, only getting up into the mid-40s as we get further to the north. Yakutat at 45 degrees. Into the mid-30s to mid-40s in the south central, with some of those more northerly locations being a little bit colder there. And then as we move into the interior, getting up into the 20s for most locations. Colder as we get closer towards the Brooks Range, only getting up to 10 degrees through the pass. Arctic Village 15 degrees. Up into the teens for highs tomorrow along the Arctic coastline. Then down the western coast of the state, Kotzebue Sound area, getting up to around 20 degrees. And then up into the mid-20s as we get into the Norton Sound area. Up to around 30 for the Kuskokwim Delta, 37 for Macquarie, and then up around 30 degrees, staying just below freezing for the Bristol Bay area, and up into the lower to mid-40s along the Aleutian Islands. Switching it up now, looking at our Marines, widespread MVFR conditions throughout the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, and eastern portions of mainland Alaska from the south central through the interior, then up all the way along the Arctic coastline. Going to see some MVFR conditions with the IFR mixed in primarily along the Alaska Range, MVFR conditions in the Panhandle as well. Through the passes, AKwx should be via MVFR, improving to VFR throughout the day tomorrow, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will both start off IFR but go all the way to VFR, as will Rainy Pass for tomorrow. Windy Pass, IFR improving to marginal conditions for tomorrow. Isabel Pass will stay MVFR, as will Mintasta Pass. Tanita Pass also marginal for tomorrow. Portage MVFR. Chilkoot and White will also be MVFR all day tomorrow. Looking at our freezing levels, some warmer air for the Panhandle, surface freezing line staying off the Gulf coastline, and some warmer air way out west underneath that high pressure that we saw earlier. For our icing charts, primarily located in the eastern part of the state, eastern part of the Arctic coastline between 2,000 and 5,000 feet there. Going into the eastern parts of the interior between 4,000 and 8,000, above 10,000 feet as we get down into the south central, and then down over the Panhandle between 9,000 and 12,000 feet for tomorrow. Taking a look now at our jet stream, we'll start off in the west, follow the jet off of Russia, 130 knots there, and then becoming northerly over the west coast of the state, as high as 105 knots, and that's helping to bring down a lot of that colder air that's primarily going to impact the west coast of the state, but some of that trying to get through the Alaska Range into places around Cook Inlet. Then to the south of the Aleutian Islands, a westerly component of the jet, around 80 knots there, picking up to 105 knots south of the peninsula, and then up to as high as 150 knots heading towards Vancouver Island, and then dropping down to 90 as we push off to the east. Taking a look at our 9,000 feet for winds, our low there just north of Kodiak Island by the Barren Islands. Some southwesterly flow coming in off of the Gulf, anywhere from 30 to 35 knots, strongest as we start to push more inland. Eastern parts of mainland Alaska, only around 5 or 10 knots there, strongest coming in out of a northwesterly direction, getting up to as high as 20 knots. Then along the west coast of the state where we saw our strongest winds with the jet, we're going to see our strongest winds at all of the levels moving down towards the surface, 25 knots up to the north, but getting as high as 60 knots as we get in the Bristol Bay area, moving out over the Alaska Peninsula. Dropping down pretty quickly to 45 and then to 20 knots as we get out over the central Aleutian Islands, and becoming more southwesterly as we get way out to the west, 25 to 30 knots over the western Aleutians. down to 3,000 feet, seeing that southwesterly flow continuing 15 to 25 knots for the western Aleutians, coming around our high pressure, getting as high as 30 knots there for the eastern Aleutians, but our strongest winds again right over the Alaska Peninsula, around 50 knots out of that northerly direction. Up by the Seward Peninsula, still pretty strong there, out of a northerly direction, 40 knots there. Moving out over mainland part of the state, northeasterly flow for the most part with a stronger corridor, winds about 30 knots cutting right through the upper Yukon Valley and kind of following the Yukon Valley down towards that main part of the stronger winds. So we look out over the south central though, only around 10 knots there of an easterly direction, and then southwesterly flow 20 to 25 knots out over the Alaska Panhandle. Taking a look now at our turbulence. As for tomorrow in the morning hours, we are going to see some in the very southern portions of the Panhandle below 4,000 feet, but that should improve to just being some very light chop as we move out into the afternoon hours. Along the west coast of the state from the Kotzebue Sound area below 4,000 feet down to the Bristol Bay area below 5,000 feet, and then just to the east of the eastern Aleutian Islands below 4,000 feet there. And then as we move into the evening hours below 2,000 feet, expected some light turbulence for the western Aleutians. If you stay with us, we'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Planetary ping pong.
Welcome to Stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
2 weeks ago, we gave you a heads up on something really cool happening in the pre-dawn sky between the planets Mars, Jupiter, and Venus. Well, that time is here.
That's right, James. We're nearing the end of an exciting multi-planetary conjunction, and the moon will also join the fun.
In fact, the moon and planets will change position so quickly over this week, it's going to look like a game of planetary ping pong.
What are we talking about? Oh, let's show you. Okay, we have our skies set for just before sunrise at the beginning of this week. The date is Monday, October 26th, and you'll see a beautiful triangle in the eastern sky, formed by the planets Venus, Jupiter, and Mars.
Venus and Jupiter are making their second closest approach to each other this year. The last close encounter they had was on June 30th, 2015. Venus is the bright object on the right, and Jupiter is the slightly dimmer object on the left.
If you looked at Venus through a telescope 2 weeks ago, it looked more crescent-shaped. But now we see it in a quarter phase, showing us half of its daylit side and half of its nighttime side. 2 weeks ago, on October 17th, Jupiter passed very close to Mars on its way westward to join Venus. Apparently, Venus didn't enjoy Jupiter's company because now Venus appears to be heading eastward to join Mars.
So, if you go outside in the early part of this week, below Venus and Jupiter, you'll see the red planet Mars. Mars is still over 200 million miles away and will be relatively dim compared to Venus and Jupiter, but its red color is unmistakable.
Here's where the planetary ping pong begins. Jupiter is right next to Venus on October 26th. But as the week passes, Venus appears to drop lower and lower in the sky. It's as if Jupiter is volleying Venus down to Mars, who will of course miss the return volley, but will put on quite a close encounter with Venus as it passes by.
Here's where Venus will be on October 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th, and on Halloween morning, Venus will be within just a few degrees of Mars, the god of war. All this movement is happening because our position in the solar system is changing. As we're orbiting the sun, our fellow planets are orbiting as well. Since we're all traveling at different speeds and we're all different distances from the sun, our perspective of the planets against the background stars constantly changes.
Ancient astronomers called the planets wandering stars because of these peculiar movements. During the month of October, going into the first week of November, Venus and Mars will cross our line of sight with Jupiter, making the planets appear to drift from one to the other like fickle dance partners.
The high point of the Mars-Venus encounter happens during the week of November 3rd. Mars, the god of war, and Venus, the goddess of love, once again are within a full moon width of each other. The last time these two planets were this close was back in February of this year.
Here's where they'll be on the morning of November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
But wait, There's more. Just a few days later, the waning crescent moon will pass close to Jupiter on Friday, November 6th, and will appear to volley the moon eastward to Venus on Saturday morning, November 7th.
I'm not a morning person, but this will be something worth waking up early for. On the mornings of November 6th and 7th, the moon will also be in just the right position for us to see Earth shine.
Earth shine before sunrise is also referred to as the new moon in the old moon's arms. This is a phenomenon where you can see the man in the moon pattern faintly on the dark portion of the moon.
If you were standing on the nighttime side of the moon, facing the Earth, you would see a waxing gibbous Earth. There's so much sunlight reflecting off the Earth that it lights up the nighttime side of the moon, just enough for us to see it, albeit faintly.
So there you have it, a game of planetary ping pong with the moon as referee.
Keep looking up.
Welcome back to your Alaska weather. I'm meteorologist Perry Daney. Now for your marine forecast. Starting off with the sea ice forecast, the Beaufort Sea is still covered with ice. There is some new ice formation that's starting to form along the northwest coastline, and still some ice forming also in the Kotzebue Sound. Earlier, there was reported some ice forming also in the northeast quadrant of the Norton Sound. Now for your marine forecast for the southeast. In the inside waters near the Dixon entrance, southeasterly winds 25 knots, and they start diminishing as you go farther north. When you get to Lynn Canal, they're going to be northerly at 10 knots. The outside waters, that's where all the action is. You're going to have isolated thunderstorms, and you'll have southwest winds 25 knots and start diminishing to 15 knots. You get near Yakutat and southeasterly. For Saturday, your inside waters are predominantly going to be all northerly winds, small craft winds, and they're going to be wave heights 6 to 5 feet. And then in the outside waters, easterly winds, small craft down near by Dixon entrance, and then you start diminishing as you go farther north near Yakutat and becoming more southeasterly at 15 knots. Now for the marine forecast for south central. Starting off with the Prince William Sound, you're going to have easterly winds, 15 knots. And then out of the northern Cook Inlet and the southern Cook Inlet, northerly winds, 20, 25 knots. And then pretty much all over the, coming out of the Alaska Peninsula, you're going to have northwest winds with the colder air filtering down, and they're going to be 45 knots. And then on the Kodiak and the Barren Islands, 40, 35 knots. Wave heights are going to be range anywhere from 12 to 10 feet. For Saturday, south central, again, Prince William Sound, northerly winds 10 knots. You get farther south, they're going to increase to, again, that northwesterly flow, colder air filtering through the gaps. Northwest winds 35 knots through the Barren Islands. Near Kodiak and Shelikof, 30, 35 knots. Again, you'll have gustier winds coming out of the bays and passes. And then for the North Cook Inlet and the Southern Cook Inlet, you'll have northerly winds 15 knots, wave heights 3 to 4 feet. Then for the Friday marine forecast for Alaska Peninsula, you're going to have predominantly all northerly winds, gale force winds on the Bering side, 40 knots. And then on the Pacific side, you're going to have northwest winds and higher gusts coming out of the bays and passes. Your sea heights are going to range from 11 to 14 feet. For Saturday, the marine forecast, again, predominantly all northwesterly. Again, as colder air from the north is still going to filter down. You're going to have northwesterly winds, small craft on the Bering side, and gale force winds on the northwest side, on the Pacific side, that is, excuse me. And you got to love that town there, Perryville, one of my favorite towns. For the forecast for the Aleutians Islands, for Friday, northerly winds starting there by Dutch Harbor, small craft winds, and then you go farther west along the chain, they'll start becoming northwesterly, start shifting. And then farther out near Shemya, the western Aleutians, you're going to have southwesterly flow, 30 knots, and your wave heights are going to range from 10 feet to 7 feet. For Saturday, your marine forecast will be southwesterly. Again, the high pressure is going to be building in, going to be on the warm side of that high that's farther south of the chain. And you're going to have gale force winds predominantly from Shemya to Atka. and then they're going to diminish to small craft from Nikolsky to Dutch Harbor. Your wave heights are going to range from 5 feet near Dutch and 17 feet stronger out there by Shemya. For your west coast forecast, marine, for Friday, you're going to have, again, northerly winds, small craft, a little stronger gale force there south of Nunavik Island, and then westerly 20 knots by the Pribilofs. The St. Lawrence Island, Matthew Island, correction on that, is going to be northwesterly at 20 knots. Your wave height is going to be range from 4 to 11 feet. And then for Saturday, southwesterly winds, small craft advisory winds there, and again, wave heights 5 to 8 feet. Then for the Arctic coast for Friday, you're going to have weak grading up here, so you're going to be northerly near Prudhoe Bay, and then easterly east of Prudhoe Bay, and then from Barrow northeasterly at 10, and then you go along the coast, you get to the Bering Strait, they're going to be northeast to northerly at 20 knots. Wave heights are going to be 4 feet to 6 feet down in the Bering Strait, and again, no sea height there with the ice there on the Arctic coastline. And then for Saturday, again, light weak gradient there from east of Barrow, southerly there for Prudhoe Bay, and then northeast from Barrow, northeast winds for Barrow, correction on that, for Barrow. And then along the coast from Bering Strait northward, you're going to have southerly winds at 25 knots. Now tonight's forecast, you're going to have these double barrel lows here. The one over the Panhandle, the one over the Panhandle here is going to give some thunderstorms and some rain through tonight. And then for the south central, you're going to have a mixture of rain and snow through the Anchorage Bowl, and farther interior, you're going to have snow showers with that inverted trough. And along the chain, you're going to have rain showers. Thank you for your Alaska weather. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.